My name is Danika Cooley, and I'm from Thinking Kids Press, and I am here to talk to you about what is notebooking and how do you notebook and should you notebook. So I have a lot of information that I just wanted to go through with you today. I started homeschooling our younger two kids, I think it's 11 years ago now. And I just knew I always really disliked workbooks when I was growing up. I didn't like the fill in the blank and, you know, where you had to pick from things. I just felt like it was busy work and I just didn't want my kids to do that. And so I was really excited when I found Apologia's notebooks and we used those with our kids, and I saw the way that they grew through notebooking. And so that became a really central part of the way that I developed our curriculum. So I should tell you, at Thinking Kids Press, we help equip parents to teach the Bible and Christian history to their kids. And so notebooking is a tool that we use to help do that. But notebooking can be used with any subject and any discipline that you want to use it with. Okay, so when I was a kid, I really hated the workbooks, but one of the things I did was keep journals and notebooks. And I'm a writer, but I'm not a fiction writer. So I would keep journals full of other people's poems that I would copy down, and I wrote some of my own sayings that I found that I liked, translations. Like in college, I was taking several languages and I would translate poetry that I would find, and then drawings. I majored in art, so I had drawings of everything. And that was something that I kept in my journals. So a notebook for notebooking can include sketching, note-taking, brainstorming. So we're going to go through what notebooking is and what it develops and why it's worth using. But real quick, I wanted to talk about some of the famous people who kept notebooks. We didn't call them notebooks then, we called them journals. And that's what they are, but we call it notebooking in the homeschool world, and I love that. So notebooking has been used by novelists and artists and inventors. So one of the most famous notebookers is Leonardo da Vinci. You might know him from his famous painting, The Last Supper, but he also kept notebooks full of anatomy and drawings of helicopters and airplanes, an adding machine. That might not seem like a big deal, but Leonardo da Vinci lived from 1452 to 1519. So that was a pretty big deal that he did that. So he was an artist, a mathematician, a scientist, and a writer. Beatrix Potter is another famous notebooker that you might know. She was born in 1866 and died in 1943. And she's best known for the Tales of Peter Rabbit. And she started notebooking as a young girl and kept watercolor sketches of animals. She took drawings of nature, archaeological finds. She lived in the country, so stuff she would find. She also was kind of a nature scientist. She studied the reproduction of fungal spores. So she had notebooks full of that. Then there was Thomas Alva Edison. Maybe you know Edison. He was born in 1847 and died in 1931. He had 1,093 patents. And he was an inventor. And he's best known for the incandescent light bulb, the phonograph, motion picture camera. We probably wouldn't be here doing this today if it wasn't for Edison. So if you have a kid that's really kind of an inventor, getting into the discipline of notebooking can be really helpful. And just to help with patents, if they really come up with something good, you just want to like sign their page and date it, because that'll help. So another really famous notebooker, and we're just about done with this, but I think it's interesting, and maybe that's because I'm a historian too. Fyodor Mikhailovich Dostoevsky. He was born in 1821, died in 1881, and he was an author. His works included Crime and Punishment and the Brothers Karamazov. They've been translated into over 170 languages. Okay. More notebookers: Ludwig van Beethoven, Thomas Jefferson, Nikola Tesla, John Adams, his son John Quincy Adams, Louisa May Alcott, Lewis Carroll, Madeleine L'Engle. So lots of people have used notebooking throughout the centuries. This is not a new discipline, but it's something that your kids can learn to use, and it will help them be very creative, thoughtful students. So what is notebooking? Notebooking, just plain and simple, is the practice of recording thoughts, feelings, and facts in writing and sketches. So that's pretty simple. Your kids can learn, create, experiment, and record in their notebook. It is not a finished work, so it's just a part of the learning process, which is why you can use it with any subject that you'd like. So kids are learning to think as they write and as they draw. I love drawing as part of the notebooking process, and you'll notice in a lot of those notebookers that I just talked about, a lot of their notebooks were artwork, like Beatrix Potter and Leonardo da Vinci. There was a lot of drawing going on there. So kids are learning to think through their opinions, question what they've read in their reading, and give a written narration, which I think is important. So they will be reading and then thinking about what they've read and then putting it into writing or into a picture and recounting what they've read. And just the process of doing that, it's called narration. And it's really important to be able to do that. Okay, and then it involves longhand writing. So you have longhand writing involves muscle memory and visualization that aid in understanding and long-term memory. So just that process of writing longhand can actually really help with the learning process, even more than reading or saying things out loud. And our kids all learn differently, but the longhand writing helps all of them regardless of how they learn. Okay, so Kristen has a 9-year-old and a 12-year-old, 4th and 7th grade. And she's thinking that this may help the 12-year-old. Yes, it will help with creativity and allowing her to really be involved, Kristen, in what she's doing. I know my kids have loved it. And I'm going to show you some examples too at the end. So you can see what they've done. My kids are almost graduated, and notebooking has been a really integral part of their learning and their development. Notebooking is factual. So you're going to record ideas and information. It's creative. Kids get to write about what interests them. Hi, Carly. I love Carly. And they can be funny. My kids, I have boys, so being funny is like a really important character trait for them. And notebooking allows them to do that in their learning. Notebooking is permanent. It is a record of what your kids have learned. I can't tell you how much I love that I have boxes full of notebooks in our attic because they're precious to me. And I think one day they'll be important to the kids. It's developmental. So notebooking allows your kids to develop at their own rate. They develop daily writing skills. Through their daily writing, they develop those skills and cognitive abilities. It is narrative, so they're going to be able to retell science facts or Bible stories or literature information, whatever it is that you guys are covering. Notebooking is cognitive. So you are not copying information. Your kids are actually digesting and retelling and asking questions. They're sharing their impressions. It develops higher thinking skills. And that's really what we've seen with our kids, is that they are able to read a book and then take other sources and put them all together and submit it in a publishable way. And they've won a number of scholarships that way. And I think part of what has allowed them to develop those really critical thinking skills has been notebooking. It's flexible. So you can apply notebooking to most educational disciplines, and it is adaptable to every student and topic. And I think that's important. Yes, Carly, allowing your kids is, especially for boys, their humor to shine through. I know, like, I have a very staunch personality type. I'm very structured, but just giving my kids the creativity and the ability and the space to be funny has been great. So sometimes, like when we started with Apologia, their drawings of slugs would, they'd be wearing army hats and driving tanks, and that's okay. They drew really good slugs and they were thinking about the slugs, and then they wrote about the slugs, and sometimes the slugs had funny stories. And my son had his notebooking featured our rabbit in every page for a really long time. And he did not like our rabbit. So he made a lot of jokes, and I just, let that be. And he's very funny now. And I liked our rabbit, but I had to just, let him be a boy. And he enjoyed writing because of that, I think. Okay. Some things that notebooking is not, and I think this is important too. Notebooking is not journaling. There is no pressure to free write or to invent things. I know a lot of times in traditional schools, they'll have like a journaling time, especially for boys that tend to be more fact-based and enjoy nonfiction. And I'm that way too. It can be really hard to sit down and free write something or write about their weekend. But if they can write about a battle that they read about, something in history, something in the Bible, they're really connected to the writing. Notebooking is not mystical. So our kids aren't like looking deep in themselves for some profound truth. They're actually taking information from outside of themselves and disseminating it and thinking through it and then putting it on the page. It's not fictional, so it records facts, ideas, thoughts on those facts. That's why you see it used by a lot of inventors, and a lot of scientists used notebooking. It's not too hard. So if notebooking seems like it's too hard for your child, it may be that you are requiring too much. So you can help your kids form sentences. You can dictate like one or two sentences from the writing, from the reading that you've done. And in a few weeks, then you can add another sentence to their workload. Because kids do need to develop. I think a lot of times we expect them to fill the page or do what we think they need to do. And sometimes that's just not practical. And also it takes time for the muscles in their hands to develop. So I'm not done with what notebooking isn't, but I don't want to lose this. So Kristen says, so much is online now. I like the opportunity to actually write and draw on paper. I think it helps with retention. It certainly, it definitely does. I think that not only does it help with muscle memory and developing those muscles, it is actually important that our kids develop their finger and hand and wrist muscles. And they do that through writing. And then they also do it through, in other ways, through larger activities like hitting with a hammer. But we want them to be able to write, which this is, I was going to bring this up later, but I'll say it now. When your kids are young, it actually hurts to write, and developing those muscles takes time. So it's okay if it hurts. Like, it's okay for them to write a sentence. It's going to make them sore when they're little. But respect the fact that it does make them sore and they need to just then write another sentence the next day. Because, you know, like I power washed our driveway and walkways this weekend. It made me really sore, but it was a one-time job. I just wanted to get it done. I knew I was going to be sore afterwards because it's a weird position you're in. So I could just power through it, and I'm an adult. But if I was going to be doing that every day, I'd want to start small and build up the weird muscles in the lower part of my back for standing weird like that. If I was going to be power washing as a career, I would want to make sure that I was developing those muscles. And with writing, you want to do the same thing. So remember, with your little ones, when they are learning to write, it actually does make their hands sore. And they are learning like the small muscle movements that are required for writing. So that's why we start with bigger sentence spaces. Okay, this is why I have notes, because I love to talk and I get way off. I think that's important, like to remember the muscle thing, but I'm going to go back to my notes. So notebooking is also not a final draft. Like I was talking about my boys turning in scholarship essays, and they've done really well with the essays. I think because they've learned to think critically and they've learned to write and they've learned pre-writing through notebooking, but their notebooking isn't a final draft. So one thing I never did was go in and edit it. I did not edit their notebooks. It was for them and it was a learning experience. So it's not high pressure. It develops new skills and then they work on honing those developing skills. In just a few minutes a day or after during each class, that's what they're doing is using the notebooking to develop those skills. So it doesn't need to be high pressure. I think another thing that especially parents like me who are super type A tend to do is we put too much pressure on our kids, and we can just relax and be patient. And notebooking is a fun way to do that. So notebooking is not highly structured. Again, there are no fill in the blanks. It's not like a pick a word from this list type of busy work where you're trying to help the kids remember. They are actually remembering because they're drawing pictures or writing lists or sentences or thoughts about what they have learned. And sometimes our children's thoughts might not be the ones we would pick to put in our own notebooks, and that's okay. Remember, this is a learning process. So things that notebooking develops, and again, this is a skill and a discipline that can be used with any subject. And I'm going to show you some examples and some of our products afterwards. But it can be used to develop handwriting. And again, just the practice of going through and writing longhand, it develops those muscles. It gives kids time to practice. We also did handwriting practice where I was helping them form the letters. But I think practice where you don't have somebody looking over your shoulder and you're just actually using the skill is very important. So notebooking develops reading and listening comprehension. So it requires our kids to pay attention to the text. They have to understand what they're reading and then be able to describe or narrate in their own words. And again, when my kids were little, I would help them pick what was important or help them form a sentence, because when they're little, they're learning to do so many things at the same time. They're trying to remember how to form the letters. They have to remember grammar. They have to remember the story. It's a lot. So we would read a part of the Bible, and I would say, okay, what did we learn in David and Goliath? We learned that David trusted God, period. And then I would help them remember to capitalize David and capitalize God. It was 3-word sentence, and they would write it down, and then they would draw a picture, and we would be done. And then as they grew in their ability to do that themselves, they would tell me, hey, Mom, I got this. Hey, Mom, I know what to write about David. I know what to write about Slugs. My slug is driving a tank for a reason, and don't tell me what to do. And so then the learning was something that they were doing on their own, which is really fun. Notebooking helps develop pre-writing. So it helps students learn to take notes, identify important information, organize thoughts, make notes on what to research later. Often my kids would go and look things up later that they wanted to know about because it wasn't covered in whatever we were studying. So that was fun. Like my son would often, make a note about an animal he wanted to learn about and then go do that. And it becomes, notebooking does all of this stuff in a really sneaky way, which I appreciate. Kids, they want to do it after a while. So it helps with research. So it helps them inspire further research. Like I was saying, my son used to go out with sidewalk chalk and a measuring tape and a book and measure all the animals and mark them in the street. So that was the natural progression of his notebooking. It got way bigger. And then it helps with research because you can assign research projects and they can just do notes on them. Not every research project has to be a full essay. And we do that in Bible Road Trip too. For the dialectic level, which is grades 7 through 9, they have mini research projects every week where they just go learn about ancient Samaria, and they'll take some notes on it and then they're done. Okay, so it helps with long-term memory. Again, that writing really cements into the brain. It helps with cognitive skills. So it helps with the higher thought processes. Okay, so we talked about what notebooking is, what it is not. Famous people who've used notebooking. I'm going to give you some tips. And some of these I think I've covered, but be patient with your young notebookers. So we'll cover notebooking with little people first, and then we'll go up. So I would not start with notebooking younger than first grade. I think with preschoolers and kindergartners, just fun crafts and projects, like hands-on things, stickers, coloring, anything that your kids can do that is just a lot of fun. But I would not have your young kids notebook because they're just not ready to write, and you're going to kind of stress them out. So in first grade, that would be the earliest starting time. And they're, forming letters for first graders is a chore. They have to think through how each letter looks and sounds, and they're learning to read. They have a lot going on. And on top of that, they have the muscle development. They're working on grammar, like every sentence has to have a period. They have a lot going on in their heads. So it helps if you help them decide what to write down. And when you're starting notebooking with little people, it can be drawings. It can be one word. Like a lot of times our kids just made lists like, what do we know about a slug? And then they would write 3 things. And it wouldn't be 3 sentences. It would just be 3 words that we know about slugs. Okay, I think another great thing that you can do is use engaging notebooking pages. Notebooking can be done in just a spiral bound notebook, but it is often nice for our kids if the notebooking pages have some structure. And I'm going to show you some examples of that. So fun space to write and draw, and lines that are big enough to write on, that is a big deal. So keep your expectations reasonable. You want to read a small section, talk about your reading, and then have them write a sentence or three. And again, for little people, you might compose that sentence. We always had colored pencils on hand, their favorite pencils that would erase, and pens. There's some great erasable pens now that I love, and they're colored and I use them for everything, and they're great for notebooking. And then just encourage them as they're going into upper grades, as they're growing, to expand their writing skills. They can think a little more on their own, do a little more narrating on their own. They can write more, compose their own sentences. And again, I never edited my children's notebooks, but sometimes as they got older, I would stop and say, why don't you read to me what you wrote? Because I like to make sure that they're still writing about the same thing we're talking about. And with teens, by the time your kids are teens, if you've started notebooking from the beginning, encourage critical thinking, expect complete thoughts from them. They can use their notebooks for larger research projects. We actually at Thinking Kids have Cobblestone Path church history notebooks that give kids kind of like a guided research project through church history, where they'll look up people and events and take some notes on them. And then again, in the Bible road trip, the older grades have these little mini research projects they can do. So that is notebooking. It's just so important. I think it's been a great way for our kids to develop skills and to learn, and to just really be able to apply some critical thinking and some research and some organization of thought to their writing. And it's been really helpful. So I'm going to show you a few resources that we have. But this is the My Timeline Notebooking Journal, and it's got a lot of artwork in it. And I was going to show you too how we print these, because everything at thinkingkidspress.com right now is digital. It's nice because you can buy a household license. If you have more than one kid, that's really going to save you some money, because you can print off as many copies as you want for the kids in your household. We also have classroom licenses if you want to buy them for co-op or Sunday school or whatever. But I always print notebooking journals on cardstock. It's a tiny bit more expensive for me, but it's much easier for the kids to write on, and it doesn't bleed through. And then it makes a really nice product for them. And then I just take them to the local office store, and for like $6, it depends on the office store. Some of them are like $5. I have them put a clear cover on and a black cover on the back and just a spiral binding, and they bind them, and it's a great little notebook for them. Other people put them in 3-hole notebooks, and that's fine too. This is our timeline notebooking journal. So it's just got the years, and in the beginning, of course, there's not as much stuff to write about because we really don't know that much. But once we got further in, my kids really enjoyed keeping notes on the dates that they were learning about. And then in our timeline notebooking journal at the top, there's Bible verses and also Christian history quotes on time, which I think is fun. We try to make even our even our stuff that could be neutral, we try to make it something that honors the Lord, because for us, that's a big deal. But again, you can notebook any way you want. For the younger kids, we have 3 notebooks that are pretty popular. My field trip and travel journal. I know it seems like this wouldn't be something that you could use right now, but there are so many little day trips and staycation type things you can do. And we always try to put some instructions. I say we because we're a company, but I write all of these and I really enjoy it. So there's places I'd like to go, places I've been, you know. We like to let our kids tool around on Google Maps and in atlases that we purchased. And so there's like places all over the world to color in. So they just can keep track of what they saw on their trip, where they went, who went with them, a story, some pictures. So that's our travel journal. So you see, like, you go on field trips and it's easy to come home or the next day, like, don't stress your kids out. I am so big on don't stress your kids out. Like, be patient with them and give them some space. But like the next day, just to have them write a little story. And, you know, it can take 3 or 4 days to, you know, fill out 3 pages about where they went, and that's okay. And then print out some pictures, because I know we all have our pictures on our phone, but our kids don't get to see that. So you can just print them from your printer. I'm also really big on having a printer. Such a great thing. I think I sold furniture to buy our first printer. I was like, I need a printer. So just print them out and they can glue them in. Okay, so this is my book log. This is everything that it took me years in writing conferences to learn as an adult for kids. And I thought that was kind of cool, that they could learn story structure and nonfiction structure right off the bat. So my book log, it's a book log. It's a lot of list taking, but I also really love, there's a section on the library learning about the Dewey Decimal System, and see, they'll learn about, that's something I appreciated doing with my kids through Tapestry of Grace. So I altered that and put some other stuff in. But then there's sections on story theme, worldview, author worldview, a fiction plot, fiction characters. There are types of fiction characters, and every fiction plot basically follows the same model. So if your kids know that, it helps them, even if they're never going to be a writer, it helps them learn how to read what they're reading. And then author worldview is a big deal. And identifying the story theme is also a big deal. And then in nonfiction, so this is actually like part curriculum, but it's kind of sneaky about it, and then mostly notebooking. So it talks about the nonfiction genres and nonfiction structure, and then there's a bunch of lists. But my favorite part of this was, I did this with our kids growing up, and I just redesigned it for you guys. It's much better than what I had done for our kids. But there's a nonfiction book mini report and a fiction book mini report. And I don't know if you can see it, but the fiction book mini report has the 3-act structure, hero journey fiction plot map. It talks about the different parts of the plot, and then they have to identify the different characters, because again, fiction follows a structure. And I did not have my kids were huge readers. We did keep a book log, which was really fun for them. I made it a game. For my boys, I was like, what am I going to do to make them love reading? Because they don't so much. And we made it a game. It was a competition, and we numbered. And they kept a list of every book they read. And now they are like natural born readers. So it's August, and we don't school in August because they're working and they're out kayaking and stuff. They're almost graduated. So I love the book log notebook, Kristen, so much. So they're out doing stuff. And again, they're almost ready to graduate, but one is reading the autobiography of Thomas Jefferson, and the other one's reading the Federalist Papers on their own. And I really think that the book log was part of that. It was fun for them. And again, I didn't make them write a mini book report on every book, but on the ones that were for school and that were important and that I wanted them to think through, then we did. But they put everything on their book log because it was a competition. It was fun. They have read hundreds of books, and I would never have done that if they hadn't had to write them all down. Okay. This is my sermon notebook for kids. So there's just a two-page spread for every church service, and there's a date, the main passage, other scripture references, a question to ask mom and dad about, 3 main points, and a song that I liked, and then how I can apply this sermon to my life right now. And then on each page there's something fun to do, like a little maze or a word search or coloring. These are super cute. They're also super popular. We have churches that get the classroom license and give them to all of their kids. The Bible notebooks for Bible Road Trip, they correspond by week. So if week 3, you're learning about Genesis part 1, in the instructions for Bible Road Trip, there's going to be notebooking instructions. And the nice thing is that the pages in the Bible Road Trip notebook correspond to those instructions, and they give space. They have fine artwork from all kinds of artists throughout history that corresponds to the Bible passage. And then there's a prayer for the nations section in Bible Road Trip. So there's like a section that has a list of 3 things to pray. So those come in lower grammar, which is 1st through 3rd grade, and they have really wide like lines to write on and a lot of space to draw in. And then the upper grammar has smaller lines, sometimes less space to draw in. And then dialectic has the mini project in there, much smaller lines, lots of room to write. And there's copy work for the verses for that week. And then the reason there isn't a rhetoric level notebook, you can use the dialectic level notebook for your 10th through 12th graders, and that just works fine. But I wanted the high schoolers to learn to take notes on their own because they're headed to college or into real life, and so that's why that's not there. And we may add it someday, but right now we don't have them. I am really excited that I got to share this with you. This has been like the central way that we've homeschooled. In every subject we've had notebooks and we've used them. And again, my kids love writing, and they're able to put stuff together, and their essays for scholarships have been really strong, and we've just really enjoyed using this discipline. And again, I would just remind you to just be patient. It's a developmental skill and it takes time.